Turkey's president has announced the start of an invasion as Kurdish forces move to defend the border.
The Kurds have been our essential allies in the area in our fight against ISIS. But a few days ago, President Trump announced that he'd be abandoning them, breaking an American promise and pulling out of the region, allowing Turkey to attack. Correspondent Holly Williams has, of course, been following the story all along and joins us now on the set. We're very lucky to have you here because usually you are over there, often in Turkey.
You were just there in Syria recently.
Just last month for 2 weeks. Yeah, in that part of Syria as well, actually, with the Kurdish-dominated forces.
So, you know, the president sort of tried to make a big deal out of the fact that he was only removing 50 troops. But it seems like Turkey has wasted pretty much no time in moving forward. What do we know about what's happening on the ground, or at least what's imminent?
Yeah, so the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, said this invasion has begun, and we're seeing reports on the ground of shelling already taken place and warplanes ahead. It's a bit of a confusing story. The bottom line here is that the US has essentially opened the door to Turkey invading this part of Syria, so it's a new front in this civil war that's already been going on for 8 years. This is going to cause bloodshed. People are going to die because of this invasion that the US has essentially green-lit. And let's also be really clear about who Turkey is targeting, who Turkey is fighting. They're fighting these Kurdish-dominated forces known as the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. They've been America's closest partners on the ground in Syria in the fight against ISIS. They say they've lost around 11,000 of their fighters in battles against ISIS, mainly young men and women. And when the US decided that it wanted to take on ISIS in Syria, the SDF was the only group that was ready, willing, and able to fight, and they have fought very courageously. Now, why is Turkey doing this? Well, Turkey looks upon this group, the SDF, as a terrorist organisation because of its links to a group in Turkey. And they've been agitating for years, months, if not years now, to get across the border. What Turkey wants is a much bigger area than the one they're operating in today. They want a so-called safe zone, 18 miles deep and 300 miles long. You know, let's see if that happens. If it does happen, there'll be even more bloodshed. So,
Holly, you recall a few weeks ago, the president made some noise when he said he was going to do this. He was going to pull all troops out of the region. The Defense Secretary, James Mattis, resigned in protest over some of the strategies that the president was considering.
That was back in December.
Right, back in December, right? So thank you. And so subsequent to that decision, and the president decided to hold back on doing that, what were they telling you on the ground about the fear that something like this could happen?
Right. So, you know, first of all, what happened is after the SDF developed this relationship with the US, the first bad news for them was that another area further to the west known as Afrin, the Turks were going to invade that, and the US said, we're not going to help you with that. So they didn't use the word betrayal then, the SDF, but they said they were very disappointed. Then back in December, President Trump said, we're going to pull all of our troops out of Syria. At the time, we think there are about 2,500 US troops there. Once again, the SDF said to us, you know, we're not using the word betrayal. We feel very disappointed in the US. And then after the former Secretary of Defense resigned, actually the US walked back that decision and it left about 1,000 troops in that part of Syria. Now the SDF is saying we feel betrayed. You know, we are furious. We are angry. They've spent years fighting against ISIS, fighting, a war that helps them because they don't want ISIS operating close to them or in their territory, but they've fought that war for us as well. And now President Trump has opened the door to Turkey invading this part of Syria, and they're going to have to fight against Turkish forces as well.
It is sort of, I mean, when you frame it that way and you explain to us what these individuals have gone through and now what they're facing, and the idea that, and this is not me saying this, this is, you know, politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, that are saying that we're abandoning our friends in the region, friends that have come to rely on us, friends that we've relied upon to face this existential crisis.
Right, so I mean, here's the deal for the US in the Middle East. The US never has good choices in the Middle East. It's not as if America can look at the Middle East and say, well, this is a no-brainer, let's do this and everything will work out really well. When it came to dealing with ISIS, the US didn't have good choices. The SDF was the group on the ground that could do the fighting. It was a natural group for the US to partner up with. But the US knew from the get-go that Turkey would be furious about that. And it was, you know, completely predictable. But the problem is, if you partner up with the SDF, Turkey's furious, and then you kind of reverse partly that decision and allow Turkey to invade that part of Syria where the SDF is based, you end up just infuriating everyone. And by the way, the betrayal of the SDF doesn't just affect America's relationship with that particular partner. Others in the region and the world see that as well and extrapolate from that what they will.
So there are other elements in Syria. There's Russia. There's Assad and the Syrian military. There's ISIS and a number of other groups. I imagine Assad isn't going to sort of sit by and say, "Okay, Turkey, you can just you want this safe zone? Go ahead and take a portion of Syria." So what are all these other what are the possibilities for all these other elements?
Right, so it's difficult to predict, but I think the fear here is this. So right now the SDF controls everything essentially east of the Euphrates River. It's about a quarter to a third of Syria. And the Syrian regime, which is backed by Russia and Iran, controls most of the territory to the west of the Euphrates. The fear here is that the SDF becomes so consumed with this fight against Turkey that it doesn't have the resources to do a number of things. So you could see, for instance, regime forces also pushing into territory east of the Euphrates, seeing this as an opportunity. That may happen. The other thing is that the SDF didn't just fight ISIS. They're holding thousands of accused ISIS fighters. And that's what we were filming last month in that part of Syria. They say they're holding around 12,000 accused ISIS fighters, including 4,500 foreigners, plus thousands of ISIS wives and children in camps. And we were inside some of those prisons. We were inside one of those camps. They have been calling on foreign countries to take those fighters home. They, for the most part, don't want them coming home. If the SDF is under-resourced because it's fighting another war against Turkey, the fear is there'll be a prison escape. And then you have ISIS reforming, regrouping its army. And then worst case scenario is again, ISIS has the resources to orchestrate or inspire terrorist attacks in Europe or even the US.
Right. I remember your reporting. You not only visited those camps and those prisons, you also visited a cemetery where so many of these fighters are now buried. What was that like?
Yeah, it's a very moving place. It's in the city of Kobani, which was attacked by ISIS. And there are thousands of gravestones in that cemetery. And they generally have a photograph of the person who's buried there. And they're young men and women. A lot of the fighters in the SDF are women. Yeah, it's a very moving place, thinking about all those people who lost their lives.
And now what they're facing now with this excursion by Germany across the border.
I really encourage
Turkey,
everyone to head to our website and look up some of Holly's most recent reporting within the prisons, the campsites with the women who have no place to go, and there are children there, and some are very proud of their affiliation with ISIS, and some are not. It's just so complicated what to do with these people. Everyone has a story. Some of them have stories of being sort of hoodwinked. They got into something they didn't expect. Some of them were quite young, and then others are not. They're unabashed when it comes to their devotion to ISIS.
This is just one question before we go, Holly. Is this the point of no return? In other words, the president has been known to change his mind about things. And I wonder, given that they do feel betrayed, given that the winds of betrayal have been blowing for quite some time, could we ever regain the trust of people in that region?
Yeah, well, the SDF, thinking specifically about the SDF, what this does is it then creates this motivation for them to go looking for other partners. Who are the potential other partners in Syria? It's the regime, it's Russia. That's what happens when you let down your partners. They go looking for someone else to partner up with.
And somebody that may be worse for us.
Yeah.
All right.
Holly Williams,
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it.